Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the West Business Development Center. My name is Kelly Geiser, and I'm the event coordinator here at West, hosting today's webinar, Words That Sell, Content Writing Basics. West is a nonprofit funded by the federal SBA, the Small Business Administration Program. We are both a women's business center and small business development center for Mendocino and Lake County. Through federal and state agencies matched with local community contributions, it is your tax dollars that allow us to provide our services to you for free. These services include one-on-one counseling, webinars, loan package readiness, and advising to small business owners and entrepreneurs at every stage of business development. We also have a pool of expert advisors that cover niche business needs from permitting to HR and e-commerce. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a West client, please visit our website or give our office a call. And just a quick disclaimer that today's webinar is for informational and educational purposes only. You can read more of the disclaimer in more detail on our website. And without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce today's instructor, Amy Scharmann, who will present Words That Sell, Content Writing Basics.
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everyone. It's always a little bizarre to do online webinars where I can't actually see my audience. I just see myself with the Mendocino coast in the background, but I am trying to feel you all in spirit. So I'm super excited to be here. And I was just telling Kelly, it's always fun for me to nerd out with people about writing and creativity and even life, if you want to, at the end. So I hope everyone's having a great summer. I know it's been really beautiful here on the Mendocino coast. Summers here are always great. So if you are somewhere else, you should definitely check it out sometime. But a little bit about me, I have my master's in fine arts in creative writing from the University of Florida in fiction writing specifically. I grew up in Kansas, but I've been in Mendocino County for the past 3 years. I have 2 children. My daughter Avery is 5.5 and my son River is 3. And Avery has started school in transitional kindergarten this last year. And so both of my kids are going to go through this school district, and I am going to be teaching English at the high school this fall. So I'm very, very excited to be doing more for the community and getting more involved. And I'm super glad that I can still contribute to West through the occasional webinar. So Kelly, go ahead and go to the next slide so we can get started. Okay, so to go over today's agenda, we are going to be talking about how to avoid those common writing pitfalls. And we are going to go over what those pitfalls are. And then we will talk about the solution to them. We're not just going to talk about the problems with writing and marketing. We're going to actually have tangible solutions that you can apply to your business. We are going to go over how to be both direct and accessible. I know for myself as a young writer, I sometimes did not really understand how to do that. How can I be direct, but not sound like a robot, not sound like I'm talking at somebody or inhuman in some way, but there is definitely a way to be direct and accessible to your audience. We're going to talk about attracting an audience. I'm going to really be hammering how you should consider your audience at almost every single step. And that doesn't mean sacrificing your identity or your authenticity, but reaching your audience is your goal. So considering them is the first step, and we're going to talk about other steps to making that connection. We are going to talk about writer's block, because this is something that I hear from people time and time again. How do you overcome writer's block? I feel paralyzed. I'm stuck. I don't have, my ideas can't be generated to the page. And so what ends up happening is, people shut down and then they don't do it. So and there's kind of an ongoing debate between professional writers, whether writer's block is actually a real thing. And I'm going to discourage this either or argument and rather just kind of shift your perspective and how you're viewing your writer's block. We're going to befriend it. We are going to also talk about embracing your creativity. You do not need to sacrifice that creative spirit. I was also just talking to Kelly about how small business owners, especially the creative artistic type, are like, I can't do this business aspect of this, I just want to create. But it is possible to be creative and strategic with your creativity. So go ahead, Kelly, and go to the next slide. We'll dive right in. So I also want to point out that phrase, time is money. To me, I don't really like that phrase. I prefer time is precious, and we can also get into the debate that time doesn't exist, and technically it really doesn't, but every moment is precious. I think we can all agree on that. And that's not only true for you. I know that as small business owners, you are very, very busy, and it is a grind. I've been there too. I came to West as a client. I had started a small business, and it's no small feat. And so I really admire everyone who's here and who's doing it, especially in today's chaos. So your time is precious, so is your audience's. And so we're going to really talk about strategies in not wasting your time and not wasting their time. There's a quote that I liked by Lori Greiner. Entrepreneurs are willing to work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40 for someone else. And I know that that's very true for me. Just having that autonomy over my own life is very important. All right, Kelly, go ahead. Okay, so let's talk about the problem. Universal writing pitfalls. Number one, vague, generalized, or repetitive language. I think that's pretty straightforward. We've all seen this kind of writing. There's also something called passive voice. And I don't know if any of you are familiar, but to just give you an example, the boy was bit by the dog is a passive statement because the subject of the sentence is not performing the action. If we turned that around and said the dog bit the boy, that is a direct active voice statement. And typically that is what you want to go for. It's usually done in less words and it is more direct. Look at the terms, passive voice, active voice, take control of that sentence. Unnecessarily wordy phrases. I'm going to actually give you examples of wordy phrases that can usually be replaced with one word. And then writer's block is another writing pitfall. I did put that because it is a real thing for people, and it does cripple them. So the next slide, go ahead, Kelly. I want to get into writing pitfalls that are specific to marketing. That lack of customer awareness, what I was talking about, considering your audience. And the idea I had for another webinar while preparing for this one was one that focuses entirely on figuring out who your audience is and how to tailor your language for that audience. In fiction writing, there's something called a character sketch. And I had this idea of doing an audience sketch, talking about who your audience is, what they want. All audiences want something. Same with characters in a story. Every character wants something. What do they want? And then how can we reach them based on who they are and what they want? So anyway, just throwing that out there. I don't know if anybody would benefit from that webinar, but I was kind of getting excited about potentially teaching it. The next writing pitfall in marketing, weak, insignificant language. And I'm going to show you an example of like there can be language that's direct, that, you know, doesn't really do anything wrong, but it's not generating excitement. It's not grabbing anybody. And so I'll kind of give you two examples side by side to see how your reaction changes when you read it. Slow, low energy communication, same thing. You know, we all know that type of language and passages that just kind of drag on and you lose interest, you know, and there's a reason for that. Inauthentic messaging. This is, you know, I've talked about really knowing your audience, right? This is now looking inward to yourself. That authenticity and something called self-efficacy, which is simply believing in yourself, believing in your message, believing in your business, your product, whatever it is that you're putting out there, you believe in it. If you don't believe in it, your message isn't going to be authentic. And then why would your audience believe in it? So I really want to take a moment to just really try to boost your confidence. So we should all be believing in ourselves, and it's not always easy to do. All right, Kelly, next slide, please. All right, so I promised that I wouldn't just dwell on the problems of writing. Here is how you can take charge of this and fix it. So being direct, keep it simple. If you can say something in less words, you probably should. Staying relevant. I don't know if anybody's taken a composition class or learning how to write an essay, but each paragraph has a specific focus, right? You have a topic sentence, and then you expand on that topic sentence. It's not so different when you're writing for marketing. Everything needs to lead into the next point. If you're unorganized and jumping around with different topics, it's going to kind of confuse your audience and not make sense. Number two, using that concrete, energized language is another tool to have in that kit. And something I want to say, this list that I'm giving you that I will then expand on, this can almost be like a checklist that you have with you when you go to revise what you've written, what you've constructed, you know, and they can be questions you ask yourself, like, am I being direct? Am I keeping it simple? You know, these are simple questions that you can ask yourself that will likely compel you to revise something. Okay, go ahead, Kelly. Next slide. Number three, can you tell I'm still hammering this? Please consider your audience, who you're talking to. And then number four, this was kind of what I was starting to get into it. Stay motivated. And I know that it's like, oh yeah, great, Amy, like, let's all stay motivated. It's not always easy to do, but staying motivated is kind of like tackling that writer's block. It's showing up. It's that action of showing up every day. I don't care if you're showing up for 15 minutes a day, you're still showing up. It's that commitment to yourself and that belief in your abilities. And taking that action, it will lead to something. It may not be what you think it's going to lead to, but I am a big believer that taking that daily action does get you to where you're supposed to be. And I know for myself, my path, I've thought, you know, I was going somewhere, and then continuing to show up every day, I wound up somewhere else. So sometimes life can surprise us, but keeping that motivation and keeping that accountability within yourself is what's, it's crucial for you to move forward here. So go ahead, Kelly. Next slide. All right, so this is kind of a hodgepodge little picture thing that's, busy and random. You are busy, but your writing shouldn't be. Next slide, Kelly. Because, as you can see from this picture, there's no audience here. And that's what will happen if your writing is too busy. Busy writing that beats around the bush, it doesn't get to the point, your audience is going to hightail it out of there. And they're not even going to think about it. It's just not going to connect for them, and they're going to move on to the next thing. You are not writing to give your audience a scavenger hunt, like this emotional scavenger hunt of something they need to solve. If I wanted to go solve these, complex issues, I would go read a dense piece of literature. There's a place for that type of, parsing out and dedication and time, even though it kind of pains me to hear how little people read these days. But, I'm going to be teaching English this fall, and we're really going to be diving into pieces of literature, and we're going to be committed to doing that. But in terms of writing for marketing, you're trying to make that instant connection and making it easy on them. It's not supposed to be a hunt. They're going to leave. Okay, go ahead, Kelly. Okay, so let's get into some tangible stuff. Less is more. Another question, as I said, you should have in your toolkit is, can I say the same thing in less words? And, taking it sentence by sentence at a time, every single word should matter here in this kind of writing when we're trying to reach people in this way and grab them. And here's some examples of how you can parse down that language. In bold is something, these are things that I see often when I was an advisor at West and editing, I would see this type of language. A number of in a sentence can be replaced with some or many, depending on what the number actually is. As a means of, people tend to think there's this myth that, the more words you have, the more eloquent you sound, or the more flowery your language is, the smarter you sound, and it's not true. Especially not for this kind of writing that you're trying to do here. As a means of can simply be replaced with to. And same thing, a couple down, in an effort to, just say to. There's one that's it kind of makes me laugh every time I see it. In the process of, you do not have to replace that with anything. You can just get rid of it. I'm in the process of studying for exams. I'm studying for exams. Do you see what I mean? It's totally unnecessary. Comes equipped with, includes. So you can see the trend here, that we're really carving down that language to make it matter. Go ahead, Kelly. Oh, and before one more thing I wanted to say is, one of my favorite creative writing workshops that I have taught in the past is a flash fiction workshop. And flash fiction, I know most of you have probably heard of short stories versus novel length works, but flash fiction is very, very short fiction. It's also called microfiction, and it happens in usually 500 words or less. And it's some of my favorite writing to do myself and also to teach, because it really relies on every word having a purpose. So you really have to think about that word choice and what you're including, because there's not as many words to get your story across. And I believe that marketing is a lot like that. So let's compare two passages here. And this is a fictional preschool that I created called Fairy Garden Preschool. So here's the first passage. Here at Fairy Garden Preschool, we are nice to the kids and one another. We want to create a place that helps the children feel comfortable so they can focus on learning. Okay, if I read this as a mother, I would think that sounds like a nice spot. Fairy Garden Preschool, they're nice there. They want their children to learn things and they want them to be comfortable, They seem great. But I'm probably going to keep looking, cool, I'll remember that, maybe. Moving on. Let's look at the next one. Kindness first, learning will follow. Fairy Garden Preschool fosters the curious spirit with a welcoming and collaborative atmosphere. There's not as many words there, but I certainly care more about them. I certainly care more about Fairy Garden Preschool. It started with a little bit of a rhythmic sentence. It led with a very specific word, kindness. It's establishing tone immediately. They're fostering curious spirits. I want my child's curious spirit to be fostered. It's very specific. It's reaching my humanness, my emotions, and it's making me care. And this summer I started a credential program to be a public school teacher, and I'm reading all this material about how learners work, how people grab onto information and thrive and want to know more. And those connections, we as humans, we want those connections. Our brains, our dendrites, they want to start forming and they want to grab a hold of things and expand on them. So hopefully you guys can kind of see what I'm getting at here. And I did see somebody saying that they disagreed. So I'm really excited to chat after the session about that. Go ahead, Kelly. Okay, so connecting with your audience. Again, and it's kind of reviewing what I've said already about questions you need to be asking yourself about your audience. Who are they? That matters. You need to keep in mind, even like visual images of who they are helpful. And like I said before, maybe even a sketch about what they want, who they are, their history, what they've experienced. And it's you projecting what they may have gone through, but it's helping form an image for you about who they are. And then how can you connect with them? What do they care about? And considering that word choice, all of you can look this up. There's something called wow words, and there are different banks that you can look at online of what wow words are. Words that typically can replace more than one simple word, right? That packs more of a punch, like foster. And rhythm too, that when you read a sentence, that ba-dum, 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 and the pauses, the way vowels and consonants play with each other, it's something that you can experiment with. And for me, it's a lot of fun to do. So, okay, Kelly, go ahead. Okay, so I want to give you an example of a brand that I think does a very good job of reaching their audience, and they really embody everything that I've talked about. So they're called the Simple Folk, and they do market children's clothes. They do have clothes for adults too, but it's mostly centered on kids. Simple, ethical, slow. So all right away, they've slowed it down, right? As mothers, we became aware of the true cost of fast, disposable fashion, and were compelled to lead the way toward a more conscious, sustainable future for our children, our communities, and our planet. And so the next slide, go ahead, Kelly, because we're going to talk about what they've done right here. So they began slowly, but they didn't drag on. It was 3 punches, boom, boom, boom. So slowly, simply and rhythmically, which is very on brand for them. So an authentic message. They announced themselves. They connected with their intended audience, and who's their intended audience? It's I don't want to say mothers, but probably mothers of small children who care about contributing to something, or care about not contributing to something that could be potentially damaging to the environment, fast fashion. They used specific evocative language, disposable fashion. I know I don't want to contribute to disposable fashion. Compelled, they felt compelled. That's kind of a powerful word too. I want to be compelled towards something. And then their use of our, they're not separating themselves from their audience. I almost feel like they're extending their hand, and I'm taking it, and they're leading me toward the journey that they themselves felt compelled to embark on. So I wanted to give you a specific example so you can kind of see this in action. I also have another example of a bio that's on the next page, if you don't mind, Kelly. Okay, so I know this is kind of difficult to read small print, so I will read it to you. And I believe that these slides will be sent to you if you want to kind of keep this for reference or study it later. But this is a photographer based in Long Beach, California. And I'll just go ahead and read your bio for you, just in case it's hard on anyone's eyes. So it says, hello, in, a very intentional, bigger, bold, yet appears to be handwritten cursive writing, which immediately makes it personal, right? I'm Meredith, owner and lead photographer at Zoom Theory. I've been a professional photographer for over 15 years with a BA in art and photography from UCR. Documenting love, relationships, and momentous occasions brings me so much joy. Even after 450 weddings, plus thousands of family portraits, I feel like I'm just getting started. It is my honor to create genuine and dreamy images that are meaningful to you. I believe in equality and support every kind of partnership. I care deeply about your experience with us and put positive energy and thoughtfulness into every celebration. Most importantly, I work to ensure that your session will be fun, efficient, and stress-free. I can't wait to tell your story with beautiful portraits that will make your heart explode. So she is not only, it has a very casual tone, because she's really wanting to display, I'm a human that cares about what I do and cares about you. She also very strategically dropped in about her experience, even after 450 weddings. Dang, that's a lot of weddings, but she slipped it in a way that I think is really smart. And then stating, that she is a safe place, for every kind of partnership. That's very important to display that and announce that. She's concise yet human, and establishes that warm tone as well. And so I wanted to give this example too, because it's professional, but it is very human. And I think that, some people get worried that they'll lose part of themselves, but this to me is an example of it's very, very possible to keep that. So go ahead, I'm ready for the next slide. Okay, so I really hope nobody works for synopses. I wanted to give an example of more of a techie company too, and what they do. But then when I found this, I was like, oh man, okay, I'm gonna show them what not to do also. So to me, this is not as successful. It's direct, yes, but as an editor, I'm already kind of picking at it. We have the future of possibilities. Okay, great. But then in the second sentence, they mention possibilities again. So the language is getting a little repetitive already. I'm also kind of overloaded with the color purple. And maybe they did that on purpose to tie it all together, but I think it needs to be adding a little bit more dimension, and it doesn't excite me. This didn't grab me. The future of possibilities. There has been a fundamental shift in product development, not merely a revolution in materials or design, but a revolution of possibilities. Thriving in a new world of innovation defined by scale and systemic complexity depends on co-optimizing software and chips. So clearly, I will point out that I'm not their audience. Clearly, I'm not their audience. And that language is very specific to reaching their audience. So that is something they've done right. I think that they likely will reach the people that they're intended to reach, but I think that they could reach even more people if they just made even those minor tweaks. And so that's why revision is paramount, very, very important. Okay, go ahead, Kelly. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to get into writer's block, the dreaded writer's block. And an author whom I like has a quote about it that I think is brilliant. Writer's block for me is a question I haven't solved yet. So is it fair to say that when we feel like we have writer's block, right? Can't we shift that perspective to thinking, okay, well, this is just a question I haven't solved yet. And it may take time to solve, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm blocked. Next slide, please, Kelly. So what is writer's block? And I've asked several people what they think it is, and basically it comes down to this type of thing, whether they're feeling uninspired, uncertain, or insecure about what they're producing. If their brain is feeling too hectic, too busy, they can't slow it down long enough to translate it to the page. Or maybe it's the opposite, and their brain and their mind is just feeling blank and empty. And I know for myself and my own journey with this, when I sit down to produce something, to write something, if it's a day where it's just not happening super easily, or what I'm putting on the page, I'm like, this is garbage. Clearly, I just should get up from my desk today and not continue. It's just a bad day and I'm just not going to keep going. That's the biggest mistake you can make as a writer, is bailing when things aren't perfect. Your communication is not perfect. And I think in a couple slides, I'm going to go into the value of a free write and allowing yourself freedom to not be perfect when you first sit down. But I think first there's one more slide on writer's block. Go ahead, Kelly. So to expand on that quote earlier, about writer's block. It's a question I haven't answered yet, but I trust that in 2 hours, 2 days, or 2 months, I will eventually answer it. Maybe I have to keep writing and come back to that part of the story later. Maybe I have to do some more research. Maybe it will come to me in the shower, but eventually I will figure it out. So it kind of ties back into that sense of self-efficacy, that belief that it will happen if you just keep showing up. And I believe that the link goes to the actual full article. Don't click on it or anything, Kelly, but if you guys get the slides, I believe that it does go to the full article with Colson Whitehead that you guys can read on your own time. Okay, go ahead, Kelly. Okay, so dealing with writer's block, embrace it. Show up anyway. Believe the work will get done. And the last one, allowing yourself to be bored. This is something that I instill in my children, in my students. For whatever reason, in this fast-paced environment of this world that we're all existing in, we think that boredom is somehow this awful thing that we have to avoid, you know, and I sense myself doing it. If I'm sitting somewhere and there's a gap in my conversation with someone else, or there's a gap in what I'm, you know, a task I'm doing, you know, our instinct is to immediately fill it somehow, fill it by looking at a phone, fill it by, you know, twiddling my thumbs or fidgeting or making a phone call, filling those gaps when it's a gift to have those gaps. And that's something that I'm really trying with intention to not run from myself, because that's where my brain will start to make those connections, start to get ideas, start to get creative. And even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable at first, but allowing yourself that space. And that's why I always encourage everyone. And when I worked at West, I encouraged my clients, listen, you have to schedule at least 15 minutes of just being with your ideas, being with yourself, really honoring that space and time. You know, we have to schedule it in these days sometimes, and do it intentionally. Okay, go ahead, Kelly. So one of my favorite writing exercises, and there's actually a great book called Bird by Anne Lamott, and I can share that in the chat afterwards. It was one of my first books that I read as a teenager, actually, when I thought that I wanted to become a writer. Little did I know what that would turn into for me. But free writing is permission to let go of basically everything that I just taught you about considering your audience, about, you know, thinking about all these things when you're writing. That's when you're revising, really carving it, right? But to also schedule in permission to trash all of that and just write, even if it's terrible, even if you don't have any punctuation, even if it's in another language, it doesn't matter. You do it for yourself. It's really a way to kind of open up those channels and let go of that inner self-critic. And for me, it accesses certain truths that I didn't even know were there. Really, it's allowing yourself to write that bad first draft. And then you can go back through later, maybe not right away, put it aside, and then come back to it and start to look through it with a highlighter even and be like, oh man, I said that. Ooh, look at me go. I said that. I didn't even mean to, but that's perfect. I'm taking it and I'm going to construct it later. Something that I'm going to do in my English classes in the fall is every day I'm going to have a free write for them. that they can do with it what they want. They will have a prompt, and then I will not look at them. They're not required to turn it in. And then at the end of the week, I'm going to have them pick one of their entries to revise and organize and present it in a way that that is polished. And so I believe that it's a great exercise in letting yourself go, but then practicing those revision techniques too. So go ahead, Kelly. So I'm going to end our webinar with just a couple of myths that people may have picked up along the way somewhere. Myth number one, flowery language attracts an audience, and it's just not always true. It's more than likely going to distract them, and then they're not going to be there to read your next flowery sentence. Myth number two, if I consider my audience, I'll sacrifice my personality. Also not true, and I hope I've made that clear in this webinar. Go ahead, Kelly. Myth number three, I can't write unless I'm inspired. Again, not true. You can show up and maybe write badly that day, but you can still write. And maybe your bad writing will loosen up the gears into writing that you think that is usable. So it's not true that you can't write unless you're inspired. We just can't be inspired all the time. And if we're going to do this professionally, we show up anyway. Myth number four, applying these writing strategies that Amy just went over will also cause me to lose my authenticity. And I also hope that we've picked up that that doesn't have to be true. So go ahead, Kelly, next slide, please. The takeaways. Move this out of my way. The takeaways. Write with intention, considering your audience, also considering your word choice, everything will get your audience to consider you, really have that intention behind everything. Communicate clearly and effectively. The language you use and the order in which you use it matters. Face your writer's block. Success depends on your willingness to show up. And embrace creativity. These writing strategies that I've just given you, those are tools, kind of a checklist that you can have backing you and will allow your creativity to come through much more. Again, it will illuminate that authentic voice. And I think that is the end of my rambling on and my presentation. So I look forward to maybe going, can I access the chat? Oh, okay.
Able to. Yeah, well, thank you, Amy. Just really quick, I did launch the poll for your feedback, which is really important to bringing Amy back for that other webinar you guys showed interest in. So please do take a moment to fill that out while we answer questions. Nick Perez, I saw that you have your hand on. I'm going to see if I can allow you to talk and ask your question in person. Hey, Nick, I've unmuted you, so go ahead and ask your question if you have one still. I guess not. Well, let me know and raise your hand again if you want to ask your question.
Maybe he was just waving.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, Susan? Susan, I've unmuted you. Go ahead.
It says she's still muted.
Yeah, I've asked to unmute. Oh,
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, my question is about how to, I mean, it's great. This webinar was awesome for me. But is there a workshop somewhere? Is there a book that you would recommend to be better at writing
That is a
for
great
business
question.
purposes?
Sure. For business purposes, I don't know if I have a recommendation for a book specific to that, but I think that there's an advisor at West. Her name's Kira, and she does marketing specifically. And I think that she could maybe have a recommendation for that. I can tell you a couple recommendations for books that have helped my writing that I think would help anybody's writing. One, you know what? I'll just go to the chat and put them in if that's okay, Susan.
Sure.
I'm really glad you're here, by the way.
Thank you.
And Susan, just from the feedback, it sounds like maybe we can rope Amy in for like a working workshop where maybe we can
Yes.
have a writing live session together.
Yes, that would be great. I actually live in Atlanta, Georgia, so I'm not qualified to work with the West Center. I wish I could, but I can't. And
Kelly, can we do a workshop through the webinar system where I can actually interact with the people?
Yeah,
That
we
would
can
be
set up a meeting. Yeah, we can have a different setup where it'd be a little more classroom style where everyone's videos and mics would be up. But
oh, that sounds dreamy for me as a teacher to be able to
yes,
connect with the people that I'm talking with here.
yeah, and really quick, Susan, since you mentioned you were in Atlanta,
yeah.
let me do a quick spiel at the very end. So I'm going to mute you really quick. Today's webinar was brought to you by California's Women's Business Center, and there are centers all over California to help you with your entrepreneurial journey. But if none of these centers are close to you, do look for a small business development center and SBDC center near you. These are the ones listed in Northern California, but this is a federal nationwide program. So for you, Susan, I do believe there are SBDCs in Georgia. I've at least seen some actively in Alabama. So if Alabama has it, I'm sure Georgia will have it. So do check one of these centers out for your free business advice. And maybe someone there can also help you with writing or just copy editing for you. And again, all these SBDCs should be providing your services, their services to you for free, since they are funded by the federal as a small business administration program, and then matched with local county and state funds. And thank you for that question. And Amy, in the chat, Nick asks, do you do one-on-one appointments?
So, Nick, I used to be an advisor for West. I was the advisor on publishing, and I did work with clients one-on-one on the writing process, on editing, on marketing stuff. Unfortunately, I did step away from that when I started working in the public school district. It was just a little bit too much at the time. And then this summer, I started the credential program. So again, the time to do it has just kind of gone away, but I'm really hoping that in future summers, maybe I'll be able to get back into advising and be able to provide those one-on-one sessions. But I'm sorry to say that at the moment I am not.
All right. Are there any more questions? Oh, Danielle. Danielle, sorry. Let me ask you to unmute, see if you can.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, thank you for a fabulous webinar. This was very helpful to me. I have a quick question. In my field of orofacial myofunctional therapy, there's lots of research, and it's very hard to, I'm finding it difficult to create a dialogue when there's all this research to present. Any quick suggestion or tip on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little difficult for me to answer that question without getting a little bit more information. Actually seeing the material that you're talking about would be kind of necessary for me to answer that question.
Okay.
But I'm trying to think how I can help you quickly in 10 seconds. Yeah, I think I would highly recommend, do you live in California, Danielle?
I
Are you
do.
eligible to receive services?
I am with the SBDC in Alameda County in
Okay.
San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay, Kelly, does that mean that she's restricted to advisors in that area?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's all by location and by regional counties. So
Okay.
it
You
does sound like
know,
Danielle is aware of her SBDC near her
Yes.
in Alameda.
Yes.
Danielle, are you working with an advisor that's specific to marketing or writing?
I was working with an advisor originally to establish a website, and then he kind of just said, "Okay, you're good." So it was not specific to writing. No.
I would encourage you to reach out to your local SBDC and tell them that you're struggling with this, because this question really does require more of a dialogue and more information. I don't want to give you the wrong advice, not knowing enough context.
Oh, I so
So
appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah, but they are there to help you. And there might be an advisor that you're just not aware of yet that could work with you in that way.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you were able to attend this webinar. Hopefully it will help a little bit with this problem.
Oh, most definitely just getting past the writer's block type of thing. Thank you.
Good. So glad.
All right. If there aren't any more questions, I thank everyone and especially Amy's time for being here today and being so present and producing such an amazing webinar. And then thank you again to all the participants and attendees. You guys do make the class, and your feedback again is so important. I will be working with Amy to get that other webinar set up. So do sign up for our newsletter or keep an eye out on our website to get updates on our upcoming webinars so you can see Amy again. And with that, I thank everyone for your time. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.